All right, well, good afternoon, guys. We're here today to talk about making content easy. In today's pandemic-stricken world that we live in, content it has simply become the most difficult item to get a hold of and to create and to generate. And so today I'm here to talk about how we can find unique ways to create, develop, and just find innovative content. So I'm going to share my screen so this works properly. All right. So as we get started, if I can get us started, there we go. So content is challenging in today's world. Even in the olden days, pre-pandemic, things were, a little bit easier, but they were challenging. And, we needed to answer questions like what events are happening versus not happening, when were they taking place, how are we going to capture them, who are we going to interview or talk with, and what kind of information are we going to be able to use? And in today's world, the curveballs that are tossed our way are they happening at all, or are they delayed? When and how and where are they taking place? How can we capture them? But also more importantly, how can we do it safely? Are we going to be wearing masks? Are we going to be a certain distance apart from people? What does that look like? And you also have who can you interview, but how can you interview them? Is that using Zoom? Is that in person? Is that yelling at them from across the football field? You've got to find new and unique ways to reach out to them. And so before we dive into sort of some of the solutions we can provide, it's good to sort of assess sort of going back to the basics. So first and foremost, as we're trying to gather content, we have to first start and think that we're first interviewers. We need to make sure that we're interviewing people to try to get their perspective, getting quotes, getting all that important stuff. The second piece is, of course, that we're photographers. Even if that isn't your official role, you should always be looking to take pictures of anything you can, especially in the world that we live in. We all have cell phones at our disposal. We all have a camera on us these days. And so making sure that you're capturing whatever you can, whenever you can, is most important. We're also journalists. We're trying to tell the stories, and, we're trying to capture what's happening from an objective point of view. We're trying to uphold certain standards, journalistic standards, when we're telling stories, which sort of segues nicely into the next piece, which is we always have to remember that we're storytellers above all else. We're trying to tell the story of the events, of the individuals. We're trying to find the different angles that we can provide to tell the story of the year that happened, or just describe what's, to our readers, what they're reading about, keeping it interesting. Last but not least, we're also problem solvers. And this is one that, we've always kind of had, but in this day and age, it really is number one. We need to hustle. We need to try to find unique ways to get around problems. In this, today we are going to have all kinds of obstacles that are going to throw themselves in our way, different obstructions and things like that. And so we have to just take them in stride, think outside the box, and find ways around that. And that's what I'm hoping we're going to be able to show you today, is just give you some ideas as to what we can use. So what do we have at our disposal? So today we've put together sort of a 4-part sequence of worksheets for you that are hopefully going to help you not only find your content, but discover some of the angles, and then help you tell the stories and add depth to those stories in different ways. So the first piece is our content generator. So a lot of times you're going to be given, you're going to be told you have pages to make in a section, and you need to try to come up with a story or something to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this link, which is going to bring me over to the content generator itself. So in here, this content generator is here to give you guys ideas for different types of content that you can run with for your pages. So on this worksheet, of course, you can list, the section that you're doing, be it student life, sports, seniors, other things. You can list what kind of thing that you're covering. Are you covering, an event like homecoming? Are you covering a group like a sport or something like that? You can also list, the page number and the number of mods that you're going to have. So if you're doing modular design, you can indicate how many different kinds of modules you have on the page, which means the secondary coverage that you're going to have to try to come up with. Last but not least, you'll also want to write in your content deadline and your page deadline. So what I mean by that is that you want to set deadlines for yourself for when you need to get all of your content in, and then by which point you have to submit the final design and all the stuff to your editors or to your advisors for submission. These two will keep you on track. They're two separate things. You'll always want to make sure you have enough time to gather your content together, make it make sense, and then put it together before submitting it. So going through here, the content generator is broken up by sections. So you've got some ideas here for student life, everything ranging from Instagram posts through student jobs, random talents, TikTok trends, then and now, top quarantine purchases, popular lawn signs, all kinds of interesting things. And so the idea is that, if you're doing a student life spread and you have a rough idea as to the event that you're covering, this is going to give you ideas as different, topics that you can cover. You have academics and things like that too, that go all the way through. If for some reason, because this is a list of as many things as we could come up with, but there's always stuff that there's always new things that you can come up with afterwards. So we've created a sort of very simple content generating formula to follow. So if ever you're looking at this list and nothing, really jumps out at you and you're like, you know what, I'm not really sure we can make that work, just follow this formula, which is essentially figuring out what section you're doing, what are you covering, who is it going to involve? Is it going to involve, a department, a class, individuals, groups? And then what's the approach you're going to go at it? How are you going to approach it? And by coming up with that information, you'll develop basically the content you'll be putting on your spreads. So that content generator is designed to help you come up with different ideas just to have content for your spreads and your mods. So once you have that, that's the first step. The second step is trying to find the different angles that you can approach that content, because now you have your topics, but you need to make sure that you're exploring them from all different sides. And so this leads us to our second worksheet, which is our content plotter. And so a plotter in the real world is just sort of to help you find angles and different things like that. And so this sheet that was created was to help you uncover the hidden angles, stories, and other elements you may not have thought of. Most yearbook students, and even sometimes us adults and advisors and even reps, we think very linearly. And so what I mean by that is that when we think of a topic, we think, okay, I need to interview X, I need to find out the who, what, where, and why of the main story, and then I'll be able to fill in what I need to do. And oftentimes by doing that, we're neglecting other angles that we can cover. And so the goal of this sheet is to help you come up with and consider all those different angles that present themselves. So in this sheet, you would fill in your topic for your page, as well as your page numbers. Again, just making sure you understand the type of spread or type of, content that you're looking to do, be it in academics, events, portraits, etc. And then you've got different I call them angular categories to be covered. So what I mean by this is that it's how are you going to approach it? So you've got the traditional sort of the personal element. So that is, individual interviews, individual team interviews, looking at approaching it from a club's perspective. But then you also have from the events perspective as well. So are you covering a small event with a small group of people or a larger event? So say like a school assembly, homecoming, something of that sort. And what kind of event is it? Is it a one-time, time-sensitive event? Is it a recurring event? So that will affect how you cover that or what angle you're going to approach it. If you're going to be approaching a one-time, time-sensitive event, it's going to change how you're interpreting your coverage versus if it's, a recurring event that happens, say, every Friday or something. The other angles that you can explore, of course, are achievements. So be it student works, individual or group achievements, a first-time achievement. So if, think of freshmen or someone new to the school, or a takeaway. So an achievement that, I always consider a takeaway as an achievement. So if you are taking part in a football game or you're taking part in some sort of class, what is a takeaway that you can take into the real world? The other side is talking about, you've got your impact. So what I mean by impact is what kind of personal impact did that have on you? So if you if you're a part of a club, say you were part of a chess club, did that have a personal impact on you? Did that impact that individual to want to take up chess professionally? I don't know. Would they want to be an international chess champion? It could be something like that. Same thing for a group or team. Did an event or did something happen that impacted the group? Environment or environmental, we're talking in that case of a building, of the school premises, things like that, something of the general environment of which you're in. Then you have also, who did it impact? Was it a small subset of students, so a small impact, a medium or large impact? So medium being a class, team, or club, or a large, an entire school or an entire community. Last but not least in this category, we've got the social issues. So of course, we're talking You know, it could be protests, it could be things that happen in the real world outside of campus that are affecting within campus. So the prime example would say be first day of school. Well, there are societal issues built into that. You know, the pandemic that we're in, how did that change that? And so you want to talk about that angle as well. You also have in-depth analytics. So I'm a big sports fan. So of course, analytics are, you know, the lifeblood of sports these days. So you have your basic statistics that exist. You also have features and surveys that you can ask. And so anything that you can gather that's just going to get you really in-depth coverage of one topic or get you numbers that you can use in some way, shape, or form. Last but not least, failing everything else, use your thematic tie-ins. So a tie-back topic to your theme, your universal theme question that you came up with when you were coming up with your theme. You know, if you can find a way to tie your topic back to your theme, that can give you another angle to approach it from. The other pieces in here, of course, are your sources. So again, this is just to help jog your memory of all the different ways that you can approach getting, you know, the different angles, the different content for your story. So you can approach students, could be teachers, admin, could be coaches, social media accounts, parents and booster clubs, sponsors. It could be all kinds of other folks as well. But this is there just to help, you know, make you think of all the different people that you can approach. Last but not least, you've got the story and coverage formats. So these are all kinds of different coverage formats that you can go after. So of course you have your standards, your storytelling copy, your detailed captions, things like that. Those are sort of the standards that are usually in most spreads. But again, you've got lots of other ideas here. You can do infographics, you can do quotable quotes, lists, verses, pros and cons, scorecards. You know, you name it, you can come up with different ideas to create a really unique spread that provides you with that other coverage. So where this becomes really useful is, say if you have a spread where you don't have a lot of pictures or you can't get a lot of pictures. So right now I have some schools of my own who can't actually get pictures of their sports practicing because technically those sports shouldn't be practicing. Well, what they've done is that they've gone out and they are getting lists. They're creating lists for those pages for the time being. You know, they're doing Q&As with the players. And so they're getting lots of other really pertinent information that they can display visually on the spread that will fill in where the pictures are lacking. So on the second page of this, of the content plotter, is just a sample. So this was actually something I did with one of my schools a couple of weeks back. So I gave them the topic of their homecoming week. We just put in rough estimates and they filled this in. So where their the check marks were all the things that they were originally planning to cover this year. The annotations that are listed here just show what they missed. So for example, they were going to do personal voices talking individual and teams, but they weren't going to talk to the clubs. So in this case, ASB, you know, who was in charge of organizing the event? How did that go? You know, what was that like in the world that we live in? You know, they didn't touch on anything, on any impacts. So what was the impact of being named homecoming king or queen? Does that change someone's life? You know, how do the seniors feel to have their last homecoming in the way that it's going to be? How does homecoming affect the community, and how was it different in the new sort of world that we live in the pandemic world that we live in? Other things they didn't think about were student works. You know, were there any cool artwork, banners? Were there any achievements? Did the football team win at the big game? Were there any big achievements by the individual, the group, or the team? Was it the first time for a football player or cheerleader, or was it, you know, the first time for a freshman or a new student to their school? Last but not least, they could ask a million kinds of surveys. You know, how did you like the event? What was your favorite part? Favorite activity during homecoming? Rate your experience. You know, they may seem like mundane questions, but when you're looking for content and you're looking for different angles to cover, they definitely can come into play. Last but not least, they also forgot to just try to find a way to tie it back into their theme. And so again, they just, you know, would have to look at how their theme would work and ask that universal theme question back into it. In terms of their sources, they hadn't considered asking their coaches, sponsors, looking at social media accounts, or even asking parents. And so again, those are all very important places to be asking. You know, even asking something like a sponsor or a teacher, you know, especially something like homecoming, you've got many different sponsors there. And so asking them how things went, how was planning, those are important things. And down here, you can see their story coverage formats. So they were actually only planning on doing first-person accounts, detailed captions, and storytelling copy, as well as a group feature on the football team, and a compare and contrast, so this year versus last year. So again, you can see there's lots of other things they could have put in there. They could have put simple and straightforward Q&As. They could have asked a who's who, so who's who on the football team versus the cheerleaders, the captains, things like that. They could find, you know, accessible people to interview if they really wanted to, and they could even ask someone for an editorial of what they thought of the event. Even listing the football scores or the statistics or different things like that, you know, list of the spirit days, the top 10 moments, things of that sort. Very, very easy to run with. So at the very bottom, there's just, you know, some friendly always remembers that, you know, you're always considering all the different angles. Just because you're listing all of these doesn't mean you have to use them. They're just there to help get you some ideas. You know, you always want to make sure you're putting yourself in the reader's shoes so that, you know, you're thinking, what do my readers want to read about this year as well as in 10 years? Or maybe if it's a parent or a staff member, what would they want to know? And a lot of times it's working with the content you have. You know, you may only get 5 pictures or 2 pictures, a couple interviews and things like that. Well, use this document to go through and try to see what you can work with, because a lot of times just that content you have might be enough to fill that page. You're just not looking at it in the right angle. And so this will hopefully help you with that. Definitely thinking outside the box is important, but most importantly, don't be afraid to come back to use this document on multiple occasions. This is a working document until your page is submitted. It's one of those things that you always want to be able to consult to it, come up with different ideas. You know, you may start with grand plans of writing a survey, but realize very quickly that survey is not going to work. So you want to come back here to get another idea. So, continuing onwards, you know, once you've got your angles and you started covering and you're getting your content, the next piece, of course, is writing good copy. So writing good copy, of course, is key. You know, you are storytellers, you're journalists. And so writing copy can sometimes be intimidating. The biggest things I usually hear back is no one reads the copy, which my argument would be that you haven't written good copy for someone to want to read. And so the idea is that by writing good copy, you're going to create great stories, you're going to convey great emotion, and you're just going to give a lot of great information that people want. And so this cheat sheet is here to help you with that. So here it allows you to write in your story and your sample headline, defining the date and the location, put a brief summary of what the story is, as well as some quotes and sources. So again, like the previous content plotter had, we were talking about your different sources. So you want to make sure you're getting their names, you're getting their quotes down. So either recording them over the phone or getting a voice recording of them to help you with that, to transcribe it, but really making sure you're not making any mistakes, you're not misquoting them, keeping that accurate, as well as a nut graph draft. So what is a nut graph draft, you're wondering? Well, that is essentially, it is condensing what I need to know in the first paragraph. So that first paragraph, your nut graph, should tell you why I should care to read it. If I'm not hooked by the end of your first paragraph, that means you need a new lead or you need a new angle to approach it up, to approach your writing. Your reader, after reading that first paragraph, should be really interested and want to continue to read your copy. And so this is just to help you do that. Your checklist below, of course, you've got, you know, your compelling nut graph. So this gives you a little bit more of that definition. Keeping your sentences short and sweet and simple structure, or structured simply, should I say. So people often get lost in long sentences. You know, you want to make sure you're keeping them short and sweet. I had an English teacher back in high school that used to say the most versatile weapon in a writer's arsenal are short sentences, and they really are. They keep people interested, you keep you reading, and just, they're great. Being specific and accurate, that's important. So again, trying to stay away from vague terms is key. You know, the more detailed you can be, the more interested people are. If you stay vague, people are just going to think you're not really certain of your facts. So being the more specific, the better. Your staff is also going to create a style guide for you. So following, you know, rules of punctuation, capitalization, how names are. So if you have one, follow it. If you don't, you know, you can always follow the one of the Associated Press. They have a very detailed one, so I would definitely recommend checking that out. Writing in the third person if you can. That is also probably one of the most important things. You know, there are a few exceptions that exist, but you should always be using the he, she, it, and they as pronouns. Writing active voice is a key element to keeping your readers engaged and interested. And writing shorter paragraphs is also something that is important, or even using paragraphs, period. There's a lot of students that don't actually, when they write, they just write giant copy blocks or giant blocks of text. Breaking those up, finding the natural breaks in there, it helps your reader wanting to keep reading, and it doesn't intimidate your reader when they just get to that page. The last piece, of course, is using actual quotes. Using real quotes is key. Don't editorialize, don't make up stuff. That is key to being accurate. You're going to be able to get actual opinions from people. You'll be able to actually get their emotions and things like that. And so making sure you're using those quotes in there. Usually trying to find upwards of 3 sources or 3 quotes if you can. In here, you've got, of course, some words to avoid. Avoiding words like this year. We know it's this year. The name of the school. We're reading. We know it's your school, of course. We're reading your book. Most, few, everybody. So again, we're talking about those vague words. And of course, there was, is, it is, am, is, are, where. You can read the rest. But again, staying away from all those as much as possible. On the back side of this worksheet, we actually have an article supplied to us by SMU out of Texas. This is an absolutely fantastic article. And it's annotated here to show you what the different pieces are, where the nut graph is, the quotes, the style guide, how everything is indicated. This was actually done this way on purpose because we're hoping that when you're going to be writing your own article, you can actually use this as reference or use this even as a stencil if you want, seeing how they wrote their stuff and trying to emulate it. And hopefully you can build off that to make yours even better. At the very bottom, again, we have the checklist just filled out, showing how it was done. And so this, as you're writing your copy, you should be doing one of these. This will help you stay on track as you move forward. So now that we have good copy, we have a story on your spread. You have your topic, you've got some pictures, hopefully, you've got some copy. So now the last but not least thing that we want to do is add some depth to the spread. And what I mean by that is adding captions. Captions, are one of the most important things. We can all have pictures on a spread, we can have copy on a spread, but the captions, they add depth to what you're trying to say. Your captions are going to give us more of the story that we can't tell in that page. And so what we'll do, so this, of course, here is to help you create better captions. And I don't know a school in the world that doesn't need help writing better captions. And so this is to help you with that. And so even though a picture is worth 1,000 words, we want to make sure that your captions are going to help, provide at least maybe not 1,000 words, but a good chunk of them. So there's 3 different types of captions, of course. There's your identification caption. So simply, identifying the first name, last name, and grades of the individuals in a picture. So usually you would see this in like team pictures or things like that. You have, of course, the basic captions, which are generally answering the who or the what of each picture. They'll identify the individuals and the groups and give us just a basic description of what's happening. And of course, then we have the storytelling captions. So those are the types of captions that I really enjoy because they will provide you more depth surrounding what's happening in the event. So they'll contain a captivating lead. So think a mini headline for your caption. Drive us into your caption. You'll identify who's there, the groups, and then you'll provide us more complementary information as well as quotes. So you're just going to, you're going to answer as many of the who, what, when, where, why, how as possible. So this here provides you with sort of an outline as to what you would want in terms of a caption. So your picture name. So this it's just to help you identify what it is. The type of caption you're going to use, be it identification, basic, or storytelling. The individuals and groups in there. Your description of the events. So again, your photographers, or if you're the photographer, you should know what was happening in and around the picture when it was taken. Any quotes that you've gathered up. The ability to write a caption lead draft. So it's just something to grab our attention when we're looking at it. And then of course, a draft of your caption itself. Much like the copy checklist, you've got your checklist below. So you've got, of course, you're identifying your caption types. So just what are you doing? What is it going to contain? Your lead or lead in to interest the reader. So what is that going to look like? Usually about, anywhere between 3 to 4 words long. You're thinking mini headline, something that's going to grab your reader's attention. Often by including one of these, that eliminates your need for numbering your photos or putting arrows or any sort of thing. People should know what they're looking at. You've got the first sentence that answers the who and the what. So who's in this picture and what are they up to? You're identifying all the faces. or identifying the groups. And so this is sort of a rule of thumb that you want to try to follow. So the reason we say faces and not people is because you might have plenty of people in a picture, but if you can't see their faces, you can't tell who they are. So by having faces, we can appropriately identify who those individuals are for our indexing later on. Normally my rule of thumb is if you have 3 or fewer faces, you want to make sure you're identifying all of them by first and last name and grade. If you're dealing with 4 or more, maybe identify them as a group. It gets very challenging when you've got so many faces in a picture to try to identify them all correctly. Adding complementary information is key, so just making sure that it's presented in the past tense, that you're giving the reader more information of what's happening surrounding that picture. So not the obvious that's in the picture, but other stuff around it. Using quotes, so again, try to convey emotion, opinions. That just helps give us more of what was happening in there. And last but not least, of course, is writing using active voice. You'll see a pattern. You always want to be using active voice when you're writing. Just creates more compelling copy, captions, everything. And of course, you've got your things to avoid, things like cliches, this year, opinions, blank attempts to blank. You know, what could that be? Using first persons, be verbs, and vague verbs in general. On the second page, you've got, of course, just samples. So again, some storytelling, things identifying what they did well, the different elements. These are meant for you to use as, again, as stencils or ideas. And of course, your checklist at the bottom. So keeping in mind, you know, that concludes our presentation for today. The big thing to keep in mind, especially when coming up with captions or coming up with copy or content in general, is that you're going to be presented with a lot of unique challenges this coming year. But make sure to, you know, keep your problem solver hat on. Make sure to consider all the different angles that can be that can be covered, and just make sure that you're giving the whole story. You know, you want to make sure that you're providing a story that's going to interest your readers and really captivate them. Thank you.